Hello and welcome to the Elder Tree podcast. My name is Twiggy Dawn. I'm the founder of the Elder Tree and Alchemilla Herbals, and I reside on Jitterbug land here in far north Queensland. You are listening to the Herbal Education segment, where each new moon I invite a myriad of plant wisdom keepers to chat about the world of herbal education, about their passions and motivations, and their dreams for the future of herbal medicine education in Australia. This podcast is brought to you by the Elder Tree, a non-for-profit organisation whose mission is putting the medicine in the hands of the people. One of the ways that we are doing this is through this podcast. If you would like to go deeper with the podcast journey while supporting the Elder Tree for as little as $2 per week, then you can become a member of our Patreon. Thanks to all of the people and plants who have helped to make this podcast possible.
Hello everyone, I'm Kat Green from Everyday Empowered. I am filling in for Twiggy this month on the Elder Tree Herbal Education segment, and I'm really excited to be here with you. Twiggy has just had a really big move, and I offered to jump on the podcast for a month. She wanted me to tell you it's because we're all a mushy, symbiotic community who help each other out, which is very true. But I just thought it'd be fun to come on here and get up to a bit of mischief. Just joking, Twiggy. So I'm going to do things a little bit different. I don't know if I have the technological skills at the last minute to set up an interview. So today you've just got me doing the pod solo. And I actually had a little bit of a sore throat this week while I was away. I was away on holidays. And so I had to turn to kitchen medicine. And it just reminds me that as a home herbalist or anyone who uses herbs, whether it's a clinical practice or just at home, you just can't overlook the amazing benefits of having a really good grasp on kitchen medicine. It's wonderful to know all the exotic herbs. It's wonderful to know, have an extensive apothecary. But if you're at home or you're talking to someone who is at their home and they're not herbalist, it's amazing to be able to rely and work with common grocery store and garden and weeds and kitchen staples that most people are going to have easy access to. It's certainly something that I call on a lot. I get a lot of phone calls from my friends or texts saying, I've got this thing, what should I do? And I've actually got to think first, well, what herbs do you have available to you? What can you actually use in everyday life that doesn't require you to go to a store or order something online? And so I'm often turning to kitchen medicine. So in that vein, I actually thought we'd talk about sage today. Now, sage is one of the herbs that I teach in our online course, Building Immunity. It's part of our Building Immunity, herbal kits, DIY remedy kits that we send people. So it's a herb that I've worked with a lot, and I think it's just so useful to have in your home. I was going to say if I could have one herb in every home, it would be sage, but that's absolutely not true. I would probably say there's at least 10 herbs that I'd love to see in everyone's homes. And I don't know how I could narrow it down to just one. But certainly sage is a really wonderful, beautiful herb to know. If you are listening and you don't like the taste of sage, don't let that put you off, because I actually don't either. I prefer blending sage with other herbs just purely from a taste point of view. I know some people love it. That's just not me. So I will share some of my favorite blends and combinations, because sometimes we can be like, oh, I don't like that herb. And so we don't work with it. We don't explore it, which is fair enough. I mean, we don't want to be drinking tea when it's disgusting, even though herbs can sometimes be a challenging taste to get used to. But it's been a really great exploration and a fun exploration for me, finding sage blends that I enjoy. And I'm actually always quite chuffed. I kind of want to go and shout to everyone, oh my God, I just drank sage and I enjoyed it. It was wonderful. So it's a good reminder to you not to discount herbs that you don't immediately love the taste of. But I would always say, doing that with some body wisdom, because sometimes if you don't like a herb, maybe it's not the right herb for you as well. So I always recommend, whenever using herbs or trialing different kind of lifestyle medicine solutions or anything, even if it's been given to you by a doctor or a herbalist, to always try and pay attention to how you feel when you're using it and just notice what comes up. And when you do that for a while, you really start getting in touch with your body. And I always like to say, especially when we're talking from a home herbal point of view, you really want to become an expert in you. And that way, whenever you are researching things online, or, you've asked some friends for advice and you're getting a whole lot of answers back. It helps you to sift through that information with like kind of having glasses on and going, yeah, that's for me. That's not for me. And you build that knowledge up over time. And I think that's particularly why home herbalism is so powerful, because you don't need to know everything. You don't need to know how this herb is going to work in every person's body, but you can definitely learn how you respond to certain things. So let's talk about sage. Sage, I actually got like hooked on sage years ago, just fascinated by it, because there is a quote. I can't remember who said it right now, but it's just an old quote that says, why, something like this anyway, why must a man die if he has sage in his garden? And then Matthew Wood has got a quote in one of his books that says, it possesses virtues almost too numerous to comprehend under a single heading. Like, doesn't that just open you up to this kind of curiosity and wonder about the benefits and the history and the longevity? And oh my gosh, and whenever I hear of a herb that has been used continuously for thousands of years, so sage was first mentioned in the Egyptian Ebers papyrus in 1500 BC. And if anyone's done any training with me, you'll know I get totally nerded out on this. Like, I talk about it every time I teach, because I love that continuity. Like, that's 3,000 years worth of continuous use of sage being passed down generation to generation and across continents. So that was in Egypt, but there are over 500 varieties of sage, and it's native to many different places across the world, and many different cultures have worked with it, and they have built up their own folklore and traditional use. And I don't know. It kind of just makes me very, very excited and humbled to be part of this legacy, and to be able to work with sage in our current time, and to be able to pass that knowledge on to you. And, if you work with sage, I would love to hear how you work with it, because I think, again, I'm just telling you all my favorite things about herbalism right now. But herbalism is so democratic. We are all always learning from the herbs. We are learning from other people who work with the herbs. We are learning from their experiences with it. There is no one person who has got ownership of this knowledge. This is shared cultural, communal, community knowledge. And, we're really honored to be able to be part of that and to participate in learning from it and in sharing it and helping make sure that knowledge goes on for the next 3,000 years. Isn't that something to think about? Talk about planning for the future. But so sage, because there are so many varieties, the sage that I'm going to be talking about today is Salvia officinalis, just the common garden sage. This won't necessarily apply to all sage varieties, particularly not the endangered white sage. So if you grow that, it's good to work with that if you feel called to, but it's something to be aware of its conservation status, I suppose. So sage comes from the Lamiaceae family, and it's just got a lot of like uses and benefits to home herbalists that are just really useful in everyday life. It's a great herb to have on hand. So before I get more into that, I just always like to, when I'm getting to know a herb, I just like to get to know who it is a little bit. And I really encourage you, if you want to pause the podcast right now, to go make a cup of sage tea if you've got it. And that way you can experience sage while you're learning about it in your head. With your head, you can learn about it with your body as well. So I have got a course coming up called Embody Herbalism, Herbal Tastes. And I offer this course because I just love herbal tastes, and I love introducing people to how can you understand herbs with your body and with your senses, because especially as home herbalists, and I know I'm talking about home herbalists a lot today, but that's generally who I like to teach in my community. And I just think it's, every home needs a herbalist. Every street needs a herbalist. I'm really passionate about that. So that's what I'm going to be referencing. But for those of you who are in clinical settings as well, obviously this applies. So I lost my train of track. I think I was talking about taste and embodied and using our senses. So sage really is, it has got a complex taste, which points to the complexity of its medicine. When I drink it, I taste the bitterness. And definitely the longer you steep it, the more the bitterness comes out. I taste the aromatic pungency of it. You can pick up the oiliness. There's a bit of an oily quality to sage. And I know it's there, but I don't pick it up as strongly, is astringency. So, astringency is an important part of sage's medicine because it is both of taste and, or technically a mouthfeel, but we'll call it a taste, and a herbal action. And so I always like to teach that it's kind of like, imagine you have a brick wall and you've got the bricks kind of placed out, and astringency is actually the action of like pulling the bricks closer together so they are tighter and closer together. And that action of pulling the tissues together has got a lot of uses in the body, which you'll find out a lot about. I don't want to get into them right now. I'm going to try and have a little bit of order in the way I talk about sage, but because I'm not going to teach, a full monograph like I normally do, we're just going to have a bit of a yarn about it on the podcast today. I won't go too into depth into everything, but I hope you really enjoy getting to know this really beautiful herb. And did I say this before? I know I started saying, well, I don't know if I finished saying it. I really love having this conversation. I think I got sidetracked about democracy and herbalism. But if you work with sage or have any other insights or want to share your experiences or your favorite blends, like please reach out to me. I'm Instagram everyday.empowered, or reach out to Twiggy on the Elder Tree podcast Instagram, or wherever else you get in touch with Twiggy to support the podcast, because I'm sure she'd love to hear from you as well. But I love having a conversation with everybody, and I hope, and I'm sure that's what you do with the other presenters. I'm sure you're already part of this beautiful Elder Tree community where we each get to enrich each other's lives. So I know I certainly enjoy listening to the other episodes of the podcast. They're pretty good. And we're very lucky in Australia that all the presenters put in the effort and the time to connect us all and to share their wisdom and to really help us feel, that sense of community. So mushy high five to you, Twiggy, and to all the other presenters. Anyway, so sage. When we get to the reason I like thinking in terms of taste is because it's not just how a herb tastes, but taste can actually tell us a lot about how the herb is going to work in our body and how, the herbal actions it's going to have. And I'm someone who really does like to ask why. I like to understand why things are happening and how they work. And taste is a really big part of that for me, for understanding. Like, I don't know if any of you have had this experience where you're looking at a herb book, and it might have been earlier in your journey than when you are now, but you're looking at a herb book or you're looking at a listing of all the herbal actions or all the ways that herb can be useful in the body. And it's really confusing, to be honest. Like early on, I was like, what the hell? Like what's the link? What is the pattern that joins all these things together? Because if you look at sage is good for cold and flus. It's good for memory and brain function. It's good for the skin, for the cardiovascular system. It's good for menopause and the reproductive system. Like, that is a lot of indications and organ systems that it works with. And so when you start to think about sage in terms of its core patterns of how it's working in the body, which taste can be part of showing us those core patterns, it starts to all make sense and they kind of all hang together. So that's just been a personal way that I've come to understand the herbs, and it's a really reference point for me. And particularly when you're getting to work with new herbs, it can really help you understand maybe what the medicine they offer is, because you already have a framework for understanding herbs that doesn't just come from rote learning or from learning through books, but you can actually learn through direct experience. And another reason I love herbal taste and that direct experience of your medicine is, yes, there are general ideas for how herbs are going to work, but obviously every batch of herbs is going to be different, whether it's grown in a, when I was last on the podcast with Twiggy, or one of the times, we were talking about lemon balm, and you should go back and listen to that podcast. She's a really great interviewer. But she was saying that up in the tropics where she was growing her lemon balm, it was much more, did she say it was more astringent? Honestly, you'd have to go back and listen to it. But I think she said saying it was more astringent, whereas down south when she was tasting it, it was more aromatic, which is what you'd expect from lemon balm. But because lemon balm is growing in two different environments, a tropical versus a temperate, it's actually going to be responding to those environments and producing different, secondary metabolites, because it needs to protect itself in and grow well in those different environments. And so it really helps to be able to taste that for yourself. So you can go, oh, well, this particular batch of lemon balm or this particular plant that I'm working with seems to have a stronger flavor of this or seems to have a stronger flavor of this. And I know this is a question that comes up quite a lot when I teach as well, is around Tulsi, because there's quite a few different varieties of Tulsi that grow locally. And people are always asking, what about this one? What about this one? And I always say, come back to taste. Like, what do you taste? And that will indicate. And it's obviously not the full picture, but it is a useful way of having that relationship with your own plants about going, oh, well, this variety of Tulsi has a stronger clove taste. So we know it's going to have a higher eugenol content and it's going to be slightly more antiseptic like the cloves are, or more numbing. And so that can help us to be in direct relationship with the herbs that we're actually working with and taking it from an abstract thing that we learn into our bodies and into the plants right in front of us. So I think you're going to get a lot of my little side notes today, but you can already hear how much I love herbal taste, and it's a way that I understand my herbs. So if you haven't checked that out, go brew yourself a cup of tea and see what you taste and what you experience as well. Okay, so that's a little bit about the taste. The energetics of sage are drying and warming. Now, there's a little bit of different opinion, I suppose, about the energetics from some people that I've read sometimes. I personally do find sage drying, but not overly drying. But I do, if I would be taking it longer term in a dry constitution, I'd just be aware of adding moistening plants in. So, and it is hot, or warming, but it's not ridiculous at the same time. But I can definitely taste that. So again, you don't have to take my word for it. You could just go and taste a cup of tea and see what are the energetics that you notice when you drink sage tea. And let us know. Let Twiggy know when she's back in the hot seat here. So that's a little bit about kind of the picture of sage, some of her fundamental patterns. And so we're going to get a little bit into how home herbalists can work with sage at home. And like I said at the start, the reason that got me thinking about this was I had a sore throat when I was away and I did not want it to develop into a cold. And so I made a cup of sage and thyme and licorice tea. Luckily, the place I was staying had some licorice, so I added that in as well. And it actually was, it's like one of my new favorite combinations. Sage and thyme and licorice was beautiful. And you could just do sage tea by itself. You could do sage tea with sweetened with a little bit of honey. You could do that sage, thyme, and licorice tea that I mentioned. You could do another one of my favorite combinations is sage, thyme, and rosemary. I call that my Mediterranean garden tea. That's a really wonderful combination that can be useful for sore throats, for respiratory problems, but also for memory and focus as well. So it's a lovely one to drink. And I think it's also fun because people kind of pigeonhole all of those herbs as culinary herbs, but it lets you see that they're not just for culinary means. They can make delicious teas and have the part of the reason that they are so well known as culinary herbs is because of their therapeutic uses, I think. Also because they're all carminatives, and so they actually help us digest our meals when we use them in food. So sage, I'll touch on that and I'll go back to colds and flus, but sage is useful as a carminative herb to help you digest your food better. Specifically, it's helpful at digesting fats. So it's often paired with cheeses and meats, so hard to digest protein foods like that, foods with fats in them, I should say. And where was I going with that? I don't know why I lost my train of thought on that. I think I was trying to add something in. There is a recipe I saw online for sage and rose chocolate, which I thought looked really good, just thinking about it from a culinary point of view. But now I'm trying to go back to digestive system. So yeah, that's where I was going to think, because it's also got that bitter aspect, the bitter flavor. We know that it's going to have not only a carminative support for the digestive system, but a bitter. So bitters help you to increase the digestive system to function optimally. They signal to the digestive system that you need to digest food soon and to start all of the processes from the mouth all the way down that are going to be helping digestive system. So increasing secretions of saliva, of hydrochloric acid. It's going to be helping regulate peristalsis. It's going to be helping all of that kind of digestive cascade. And so that's from the bitters. The bitter will also, as a choleretic, it is also going to help the liver and the gallbladder to produce and to release bile when it's needed, pancreatic enzymes. So bitter carminative herbs are supportive to the digestive system in two ways, and specifically sage has got that support for fatty foods. Going back to colds and flus, which is where I started with this, sage has got astringent qualities. So that's what we spoke about at the start. It kind of tightens tissues and brings them together. And that can be really useful because it stops the bacteria from being able to penetrate into the cells and to cause you to be sick as one part. It's anti-inflammatory and it's got the antibacterial aspects as well. So it really is useful. There's been some studies showing the effectiveness of a sage and echinacea throat spray, and they've compared that to over-the-counter medicine with good results. So I do use that sometimes as a throat spray, but you can also just make a tea. So yeah, it was a really powerful antibiotic. Not antibiotic. Yeah, it can be an antibacterial. I prefer the term antibacterial generally. So that's how I think about sage for colds and throats. For sore throats in colds and flus, I will get my words together. And it's also helpful it can be used as a diaphoretic for simple fevers. It can also be helped. One of the core patterns, the way I think about sage, is anything in the head. And this is going to kind of cover all of it. So sore throats, colds and flus, anything that's inflammation in the head, whether that's pharyngitis or laryngitis or tonsillitis, whether that's sore throat, whether it's sinusitis, whether that is, gingivitis, and you've got inflammatory kind of throat and mouth stuff going on. Sage has got an affinity for the head. It is supportive for all of those kind of conditions. And I just think it simplifies it. Anything for the head. So that also speaks to sage's support for memory and brain function. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I just want to finish off kind of colds and flus and the mouth and the throat. So sage is useful for colds and flus as a decongestant. It's useful for sinusitis. Now, again, in herbalism, from an energetic point of view, we don't just say, oh, well, sage is good for coughs, sage is good for sinusitis. That's at the end of the story, because we know as herbalists that that's not going to be as effective as if we get a little bit more specific. So the specificity that we're looking for, we know that sage is warm and drying. And so when in herbalism, we want to create balance, and I'm sure many of you know this because you're wonderful practitioners, but we want to create balance. And so we want to pair those qualities with, situations in the body where there's excess moisture, perhaps. So if you have got leaky, drippy sinuses, then the astringency in sage can help you and the drying qualities of sage can help to dry up leaky, drippy sinuses. If you have got congested sinuses, the aromatics in sage can help to loosen the congestion and help your body to get rid of it. So whether that's a cough, which I don't particularly think of sage as a cough herb, but it could be used like that. I think of it more up in the upper respiratory system. But those are going to be useful. And we do want to get in the habit of thinking about the qualities of the condition in the body and the qualities of the herbs and trying to have that level of specificity. Sage, so it's anticatarrhal, anti-inflammatory, good for sore throats. You can use it in fevers, and it's a really cool one actually to use if you have gingivitis. So another thing I'm super interested about is the oral microbiome and how that affects, the whole of our body health. And sage as an antibacterial and as an astringent herb and an anti-inflammatory herb has a really great role to play in the mouth and making sure that we have a good microbiome in the mouth. And we can use it as a mouthwash. So you just brew a strong cup of sage tea and you can just rinse your mouth with that, and that's effective. You can grind sage to a fine powder and use that as a tooth powder, which I haven't tried personally. But that's one of the ways you can work with it. You can also tincture sage and you can dilute that in water. Now, if you want to do that, ask your dentist, because I know that the use of alcohol in mouthwashes is a bit controversial, perhaps, in that most functional dentists anyway will say that you don't want to use alcohol-based mouthwashes. I asked my dentist and he was saying that, it's such a small amount of of alcohol in the tincture, diluted in water, especially if it's like 1 ml to 30 mils water dilution, then that's his advice. But if you're worried about that or curious about it, you might want to go and ask your own dentist or do a little bit of research as to what you think. So yeah, but I will use tinctures sometimes in the mouth. They're just easier to have around because you don't always want to brew a cup of tea. But if you get in the habit, it's all about what habits you develop. If you brew a cup of tea, get used to brewing it at dinner, and then you have it ready for when you brush your teeth at night, and you can keep it in the fridge for a couple of days, and that could be a way that you do it as well. So yeah, I just think that's a really cool way to work with herbs and just support the body holistically. So that's kind of a big part of the head, the cold and flu, the mouth, the throat. And the other part of using sage to support the head is around memory and brain function. So sage is a nootropic herb. It has got a long history of supporting memory, but there's also lots of modern science, lots of placebo control, double blind, balanced crossover studies showing that it supports, an improvement in clear thinking, improvement in memory, the improved concentration, improved alertness. And so sage can be wonderful to work with that. There is also studies that show its role in supporting Alzheimer's in some ways because it increases brain function and capacity, but also because it's going to reduce agitation. So it can be a really nice one to work with anytime for that, but maybe particularly as you get older. But always think that Alzheimer's is going to show up the process starts 30 years before the diagnosis. So I think it's just one of those herbs that if you get in the habit of working with regularly, you're going to be supporting that aspect of your health, or other herbs as well. But this one's just so widely available and so accessible, as long as you enjoy its taste. Oh, I will add one thing around the sore throats. Another way I love to prepare sage as a remedy is as an electuary. So if you powder sage in, a coffee grinder or however you powder your herbs, and then just add it to honey to make a thick paste, I find that a really, really effective sore throat remedy and use of sage, because it's getting the sage directly in contact with the throat, and the honey adds its own antibacterial and kind of moistening, soothing qualities as well. Now, do you have to do all of these? No, definitely not. I think too often we can get really confused and overwhelmed at the amount of things we have to do, but always it comes back to what herbs do you have, what health conditions do you want to support at home, and what remedies do you like and find easy to take. So, and it depends on who in your family. In my family, we've each got a different go-to that we like to use. So in some ways that makes it harder because you have to have it, but then in some ways it's easy because you're like, all right, well, we've got this for you. You like this, you've got this, and we just all know what our own go-to is. So sage can be used as a tea. It can be used as a mouth wash, like a gargle. It can be used as a throat spray, and it can also be used as an electuary. So they're all effective. They're all useful. And it really is just what have you got available and what's your personal preference, I would say. But because I like having conversations with people, jump on somewhere and let me know what you think, and let me know if you personally have a different experience, and if you find that one's more effective than another. Let me know. Let's all learn from each other, or let Twiggy know as well. Let's pull her into the conversation. So yeah, I really sage for the head is one of the key ways that I like to personally think about it and remember. And I'm not going to get too much into all of the ways that it does that, and we've already spoken about how it supports the digestive system. Sage can be a really useful herb for the reproductive system. Specifically, I'm going to talk about menopause. Because sage helps to regulate the waters of the body, and it can help to dry out excess secretions, it can be really supportive herb to use for hot flushes and night sweats. And there's been some clinical studies around that as well. It can help with, regulating fluids, too little, too much. And again, when I look at menopause and some of the common symptoms that people experience, if you've got brain fog, then sage helps to increase mental function and alertness. If you have got digestive symptoms, then sage can help with your digestive system. Say you're not sleeping very well, sage isn't traditionally a sleep herb, but some people that I've learned from talk about sage actually as being a nervine trophorestorative. I think Kiva Rose goes so far as to say that she finds sage a nervine trophorestorative. And so if that's part of your picture, then sage can be really supportive to the nervous system as well. I personally don't have a lot of I don't have an opinion strongly about that. That's what some people have said about it. I don't think I've worked with sage consistently enough to notice that nerving component myself, but I definitely have spoken to other people who have noticed it. So it's just an interesting thing to think about. But again, that can be one aspect of how it's going to be supporting that menopausal transition. And I think because it is so effective, it's one of those herbs that you just want everyone to know. I just wish that was common knowledge. You can use sage to support night sweats. It can also be supporting blood sugar levels and the cardiovascular system, which can be another component that you want to think about. How do we stabilize blood sugar levels? And to the point that you do want to be careful if you are on diabetic medication, that taking sage regularly doesn't affect your medication. So another way that people like to work with sage is for skin. I haven't personally used it for inflammatory skin conditions, but it is said to be really useful for eczema and psoriasis. Some clinical research showed that was similar effect to hydrocortisone. So something to think about and explore, particularly if you do have, if you want to explore in that area. With that astringent quality, we know that sage is going to be a vulnerary herb and can be useful for that as well. So that's a little bit about sage. I'm not going to go too much more in depth on any of those areas at the moment, but I just think coming back to working with it at home, we can see it's got a variety of uses. It's easy to grow. So in the subtropics where I live, sage, Rachel from Entheo Botanica taught me about sage a long, long time ago. And I remember one of her top tips was to keep sage in a pot in the subtropics. And I always grow sage in a pot. And I found it really helpful because sage doesn't like wet, soggy feet. And that might help you as well, depending on your environment. Or maybe you live in more of a temperate climate and so you've got no problems with that. But it's just such an easy one to grow. And at the Estuary Learning Conference last year, Brenda Rogers, she made a sage pesto, which still kind of blows my mind because I do find sage quite a strong flavor. But the tips that she did was she added like half the block of Parmesan. Which still kind of blows my mind. It was a lot of cheese, which luckily we already know that sage is going to support digestion, so it's going to help you digest that amount of cheese. But it was delicious. And at the conference, that was paired with Caroline Parker's plantain, seedy, weedy crackers, whatever she calls them. Oh my gosh. I was totally standing up around the demonstration table just snacking on the pesto and the crackers, as many as I could get. So yeah, Caroline Parker would have sage, I'm imagining, I can't remember right now, in her book, The Medicinal Garden. So that could be a fun one. And she definitely has a recipe for those crackers. So that might be fun to check out. And the Estuary Learning Conference is coming up in March this year. So I'm curious if there's other demonstrations. I'm doing a demonstration about macerations with Alison Meyer and Jess. And so that'll be lots of fun. But I wonder if there's other demonstrations. I have to look at the program. So whenever this comes out, go and look at the program and maybe we can catch up there and snaffle all of the demonstration food together. But sage does really lend itself to a food as medicine culinary experience. And again, that's why I like it. So just while I'm thinking about it before we finish, safety, it's generally considered safe, especially when you stick within dosage guidelines. Just be aware that if you are using sage during breastfeeding, that it will dry up breast milk. So if that's what you want to do, then it's a great use for it. But if you don't, I would avoid it in therapeutic doses, not in pregnancy. And generally you have to be aware of herbs with medication and talk to your herbalist or your doctor if they're open to it. Sometimes they can be a bit skeptical, I suppose. But yeah, be careful with blood thinners and diabetic medication. And if you are having seizures or medication for seizures, just be aware that in high doses, sage has been shown to have some effect there. So always just do your research. And I know that you guys will. I know that you are all so responsible and keen. If you're listening to the Elder Tree podcast, you are going to be keen herbalists, willing to go and look at your herb books and reputable sources online to do your own research and figure all that stuff out. So I hope that wasn't too whirlwind of a tour. I noticed it's only been half an hour, and I think the Elder Tree podcast go for a little bit longer, but I'm going to pause pretty soon. So that's a little bit about sage for home use, and particularly as an accessible medicine that is widely available. If you haven't already kind of explored that in your herbalism journey, it can be really wonderful to have a few of these like spices and everyday herbs up your sleeve. Rosemary, thyme, garlic, ginger, they're common, but they're common for a reason. I feel like I'm rooting for the underdog. Like everyone's talking about all these exotic herbs, and I'm like, yeah, but have you talked about garlic? Like garlic is next level. So if you want to nerd out with me anytime about kitchen medicine, and we can share fun ways to use it and just be like inspired and overawed by the amazingness of these herbs, reach out, tell Twiggy. I really hope that you have enjoyed this impromptu, unexpected guest edition of the podcast today. If you ever want to learn with me, I do online courses. So Instagram, everyday.empowered. The website is everydayempowered.com.au. And I love getting to talk about all this stuff. I was trying to think of something funny my kids said the other day. One of my kids did like a really funny impersonation, like a parody of us. And she kind of dressed up and she was pretending to be me, like talking about herbs. It was really cute, but I must talk about herbs a lot. And I think I said on the podcast last time, like my poor kids, they get pop quizzes when we're out, like when we're driving or walking, or point to a herb and be like, what herb is that? Like what weed is that? And they've got to tell me what weed it is. And then they're going to list off the ID points. So if you have any fun family herbal traditions in your home, let me know. Let Twiggy know. Let's start a revolution of teaching the kids while they're young. But having said that, don't take my word for it, because my kids still are young, and I'd be curious to see which memories they come out with in adulthood. maybe the herbal pop quizzes aren't going to be the highlight of their childhood, but we'll see. So yeah, thank you so much, Twiggy, for letting me guest post on the I'm really losing my words, guest host on the pod. It's been really fun. Thank you for everything you do on the Elder Tree, and to all the other hosts. You guys are all wonderful. I'm sure everyone listening is really grateful to what you do for our Australian herbal community. So maybe I'll get to talk to you again soon. I'm not really sure, but enjoy. Go and get to know Sage. And I'm not actually sure if I'm supposed to say anything else to end this off. If you're a long-time listener, which I haven't listened for the last month, so I can't remember, am I supposed to do something official? You can let me know. I feel like I want to do some kind of like, okay, officially over and out.
Thank you so much for listening to the Herbal Education segment of the Elder Tree podcast. Stay tuned every new moon as I interview more wise and inspiring herbal educators and herbal lore keepers from around Australia. If you would like to go deeper with the podcast journey, you can become a member of the Elder Tree Trove on Patreon. Contribute as little as $2 per week to access free content from our interviewees, and also access discount codes and opportunities which are exclusive to our members. You can find us on Patreon by going to www.patreon.com/The Elder Tree. Other ways that you can assist us in getting our offerings out there to more people in Australia is by subscribing and leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and on the Spotify app. Also, liking, commenting on and sharing our social media posts actually has a really positive impact and helps us to reach further with the message from all of the amazing herbal lore keepers that we interview on this podcast. Thank you so much for your support, and have a most wonderful day.